All right, let me start again. So this is Denise Bedford. Welcome to the first of a series of 5 webinars designed to solicit input and advice on the design of a knowledge sciences center that we're creating here at Kent State University. The goal today in today's webinar is to hear from you about your experiences, your advice, good practices, lessons learned in setting up similar centers. So to begin with, I'd like to provide you with a little bit of background on what we're envisioning. This center, I think, is designed to be a little bit different than perhaps the ones that we've developed in the past. I've given you in this presentation the website for the overall event. You should be able to find all of the recordings of the webinars there, as well as notes from each webinar as we move forward. So the intent is to inform Kent State University on establishing a center in Northeast Ohio. That's our immediate goal. We hope, though, that as a conceptual model develops for a center, and as it develops through the conversations we have at the symposium, that it might serve as a model for other centers across the country. We do not see the center as the only center in the country, just as we don't see our program at Kent as the only program in the country. Our intent is that if we can put some ideas and good practice models out there, others will pick them up, and before too long we will have a very, very robust a network of knowledge centers across the country, perhaps even across the world, and that we will have some very rigorous knowledge management education programs around the world as well. I have to take care of one small administrative detail here. I have to make my colleagues. There we go. Okay, so we've planned for 5 webinars. The first webinar today is focused on current and past good practice models. And we're hoping to hear from all of you on what you have experienced. The second webinar topic focuses on the kinds of knowledge science products and services that the center should support. The third topic is the activity models. In other words, how should we engage with the community? How should we engage with experts? And for this, I'm drawing on some advice that I have received from colleagues at the World Bank. Our fourth webinar will address intellectual property and intellectual capital models. The intent of the center is not necessarily to be a profit center, but in fact to be a center that offers real value to the community, that actually helps people to solve problems. The challenge there, though, is that we live in a society that is very property and capital conscious. So what kinds of capital context can we create that allow people to come and share their ideas without fear of loss of ownership or value? The fifth and final webinar topic will address the issue of the presence of the center. We will have a small physical center which has already been established here at Kent State, but we really want our presence to be virtual and wide-reaching. Ideally, if we have many centers like this set up around the country, we're communicating and working virtually with all of them. So the on-site symposium, as most of you already know from having received invitations, the first version will be in Canton, Ohio on the Kent State START campus on September 4th and 5th. The second version will be in Washington, D.C. at the Department of Transportation Library on the 10th and 11th of September. Both of these obviously are two-day events. The first day will be devoted to listening to stakeholders and thought leaders and to considering a proposal. Day 2 will be devoted to brainstorming, sharing ideas, and blueprinting a knowledge sciences center. Ideally, the design that results will be adoptable by any state or region that wishes to establish a center, and we will share fully the design that comes out of both events. So participants and participation, this is open and free to anyone who is willing to act as a representative of a stakeholder group. We will support remote and in-person participation. We want representatives of all the 5 stakeholder communities, and we'll tell you what those are in just a moment. The intention is to break into stakeholder groups on day 1, but really to network across groups throughout the 2 days. So the goal of today's webinar, as I mentioned, is to launch a discussion about the goals and objectives of an open community-focused knowledge sciences center. And please note that I said community-focused knowledge sciences center, not necessarily knowledge management research-focused center. We would also like to provide a glimpse into what we're thinking about and how we think an agricultural extension service model might work. We want to hear from you regarding successes and lessons learned from other similar endeavors, new ideas about how to design, engage, and serve the community in the general brainstorming context. So let's start with what we understand from the agricultural extension services model. So I think everyone who's on the call is probably more than familiar with the economic transition that we're making right now. I think that this is my personal opinion, but I think that a lot of the change and turbulence that we see in the economic system around us is in part a reflection of a shift from an industrial to a knowledge economy. So at the early part of the 20th century, we experienced a shift from an agricultural to an industrial economy, maybe even a little before that. So underlying these kinds of economic shifts is a change in the factors of production and the kinds of capital that produce wealth. In shifting to a knowledge economy, knowledge or intellectual capital is the primary factor of production and the primary generator of wealth. It represents a shift. The change that we're undergoing right now, I think, represents a shift from financial and physical capital to intellectual capital. So a healthy knowledge economy is one in which the whole community makes a successful transition, not just a few organizations and not just a small segment of the community. A knowledge economy rests on a broader foundation than just that of business organizations. I think an important point is also that we should not and cannot expect business and industry to carry the full burden of helping a community, a city, or a state to make this transition. They're very important actors or agents, but it takes the whole community to make this transition. And I believe that academia has a strong role to play in this transition. The question is, what role should they play? So we built our vision for a knowledge sciences center around the earlier agricultural extension model, where agricultural research and knowledge was extended to farmers and rural communities. These programs help to promote the work of universities beyond the campus and its immediate members. So an extension agent was the one who developed and delivered knowledge that furthered the agricultural economy and supported the prosperity and the well-being of agricultural communities. There are, depending on which literature you read, there are either 4 or 5 pillars of agricultural extension programs. I tend to be inclusive, so I've included 5. They include technology transfer, advisory work, non-formal education support, empowerment facilitation, and advocacy. So in technology transfer, we're looking at probably top-down delivery of new practical ideas, new technologies from research organizations out to the community In the case of the agricultural extension program, it was to the rural community, to the farmer. Today, it seems to me we need that transfer from those who have and those who know to those who need this, need the technology. And this doesn't just include the large organizations, it includes the small businesses on Main Street. Advisory work. In the agricultural extension context, this was provided in response to farmers raising problems and questions. It was focused on practical problem solving and new research topics. Non-formal education was a very important aspect of the extension program. Here, the university provided training generally as outreach to poor communities. They created movable schools, they did demonstration learning, they created publications for the rural community, provided short courses, study trips, many different approaches to educating the rural community. Empowerment facilitation is a very interesting pillar as well. This involves, in the agricultural context, farmer-to-farmer exchanges, interactive and situational learning, collaborative engagement. Advocacy was also very important. Extension services were also important sources of agricultural policy formulation and adoption, and capacity building for more successful farming practices. Perhaps we might think that a Knowledge Sciences Center could do some work in advocacy, and particularly advocacy for knowledge policy. So if we compare the goals of the extension services in an agricultural and knowledge economy, we see some pretty close parallels, I think. So in the agricultural context, we were achieving a national food security goal. In the knowledge economy, we're looking at achieving some level of intellectual capital security, something we should be worried about in a knowledge economy. In the agricultural context, we were looking at improving community livelihoods. I think there's a direct parallel to the knowledge economy. We were looking at improving the natural resource management methods. Clearly, there's a need to improve intellectual capital management and growth in the knowledge economy, and making new agricultural technologies available to farmers. I think I would go a little bit further in the knowledge economy and say we need to not only make new technologies available, but understandable, usable, and accessible. Okay, so what is our proposed vision for the Knowledge Sciences Center and that larger network? Well, our vision is that there be a Knowledge Sciences Center that supports advising and consulting, facilitates collaborative engagement, advocates for the advancement of knowledge, of the knowledge economy for the whole community, not just for some of us, provides non-formal teaching and learning to advance the workforce in the 21st century, and supports applied research that is either not profitable or affordable for business and industry. So here's just a graphic view of what we see as our 5 pillars for the Knowledge Sciences Center. What might we include in learning and teaching, maybe virtual and on-site institutes, annual symposia, webinars and seminars, skills building workshops, faculty learning, student learning, industry academia learning. Under advising and consulting, one-on-one business engagements, research partnerships, business focus groups. One that's really important from my perspective is the business community engagement and understanding business requirements and needs. Advocacy, I think there's quite a bit of work for us to do in this area. Advocating for knowledge management standards, or perhaps semantic technology standards, providing knowledge challenge markets. This is something that's hard to support in the open environment, and it could be costly for vendors to engage in, but perhaps it's something that a Knowledge Sciences Center can do. We're also interested in establishing what we call a Knowledge Economy Index for the state of Ohio. So this is an example of one of the projects we might take on and support. at the university level. There's a lot of research and development opportunity as well for a center. And I would say that most of the R&D topics I would expect to be coming in from the community. I believe many of us hold the idea that knowledge management is an applied profession. And in my experience, at least, the research topics and the research agenda comes from practice. Another pillar is outreach and partnership, providing a context for social networking among organizations that are engaged in problem solving, identifying problems and assembling expert teams or teams of interested stakeholders who would like to solve that problem, providing projects for students to work on, convening community groups and discussions, and perhaps even working with businesses and organizations to develop funding proposals. Okay, so who do we see as our 5 stakeholder groups for such a knowledge sciences center? Well, we see civil society because a really important aspect of any knowledge society is civil society, cultural, civic, religious, and community organizations. Business and industry, we have here focusing on knowledge-enriched processes, expertise, competitive roles and markets. The labor force, a very important element of the knowledge economy. What learning needs are there out there? What skills development should we be looking at? Can we come up, we are the knowledge management community. Can we come up with new organizational learning models that support the labor force, where they're working and when they're working? Technology R&D. Technology today is a very costly, high-risk environment to invest in, just because the new technologies that need to be developed are expensive. They require a lot of high-level, highly skilled individuals, and the markets aren't necessarily there to support some of the products that we need. So what can a center do to support the technology R&D community? And lastly, the academy. I'm going to express a personal opinion here, but I think that the academy needs to learn a lot from practice. So how can we improve the courses that we offer to make them relevant to the community in the knowledge economy? What do faculty need to learn in order to have credibility and credentials in the classroom? How do we need to change the way we teach to bring in what our students know? Because many of our students are practitioners in KM. So how do we rethink the academy, and how do we rethink learning? Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, our vision is to have a physical space on the main campus of Kent State University in Kent, Ohio. This is going to be a single room. We envision the center as a place to convene, a place for all of the 5 stakeholder groups to gather. We see the virtual aspect of the center being the source of the pillars that supported the agricultural extension service model and those that we've just talked about. We want to support outreach and engagement, and we need to have a strong virtual presence in order to do that. The community we expect to be spread out all over the state of Ohio, and we need to make it easy for people to engage. So given this vision, what advice would you all offer to us? So today I've tried to lay out the key questions that require your advice. So it's a vision that's waiting to be defined. So we would like your advice and guidance. We want to hear from the public sector, the private sector, businesses and organizations, the knowledge sciences academic community, the general workforce, the technology industry, civil society. We would like to hear from everyone. And we value your feedback, you will see all of your feedback reflected in the design. So let me open this up now to general discussion. May I ask, what have others tried before in the past that you would suggest we not repeat? And I open that question up for a general discussion. I think Jake Speak is our moderator, and I'm going to let him manage. Oh. Jake, do you want to manage the question?
Sure. It seems we have a question from Lori Marshall in the chat window. It's asking, can you define knowledge sciences so that we're all on the same page?
That's a really good question. We define knowledge sciences very broadly. We define it to include the traditional approach to knowledge asset management, which would include things like managing content, managing information, records management, etc. Anything related to the management and organization of codified information. We also include intellectual capital management, broadly defined to include expertise, knowledge elicitation, intellectual capital as it's discussed in the fairly rigorous intellectual capital literature. We also include organizational learning, that essentially the fuel of any kind of a knowledge economy. We include knowledge architectures. How do we design the architecture of the future? You're thinking enterprise architecture, and you insert a layer that's knowledge architecture, a little different than information or data architecture. What does that future semantic grid look like? Okay? We also include knowledge technologies. What else am I missing? We published an article in the Journal of Knowledge Management Practice in last December, January. There's a fairly good definition there. We're including first, second, and third generation knowledge management. So it's fairly inclusive. We also see knowledge sciences as a little bit broader than knowledge management. So we started out talking about a knowledge management center, but then we realized that what we're really talking about is something broader than management. Okay? Julia, I don't know if that confused more than answered the question.
This is Mary Ann Malloy from the MITRE Corporation. I have two ideas that I would like to throw out of let's not go down that path because it's been problematic in the past. The first is you want to avoid reinventing the wheel. In looking at your this slide where you are illustrating the center-side stakeholder group, and you were talking about wanting to, say, for example, contribute to learning practices that are tailorized to the needs of the workforce and so on. What we have found as we have looked out, say, across the state of Virginia, is there are pockets of great effort in these sorts of areas. So I think you want to make sure that you survey what is going on, and not just in your state, but in some of your neighboring states as well, that you might use models as practice. And I think the second thing that I wanted to comment on is that what we find, because we've been engaged in KM practice for certainly more than a decade, we are at a point now where you will have a confluence of players, some of whom are very mature in their KM practice, and some who are just starting out. And I think it's a challenge to set up a venue where there's going to be something for everyone along that spectrum. And I think it's worthwhile to put thought into that particular challenge.
Mary, those are wonderful suggestions. And I think, let me just see if I'm hearing correctly and understanding. The one thing I took away from the first thing you said is that the networking is really important. So we need to know who is doing great things already in these 5 pillars. And we definitely do not want to recreate, but we want to pull those people into the center, or the virtual center, at least the network of the center, and leverage what they're already doing, which is kind of at base a good knowledge management practice in itself. And I was so I think both of your points, I think, I took away from them the need to network and leverage what already exists.
Well, the second point was really more focused on the fact that you're going to have a spectrum of practitioners that range from those who are very mature to others who are just getting started in KM. And how do you have a venue where there is something for everyone along that spectrum if you really want to engage a full community?
Yes, and I think that's one of the topics we should discuss maybe in more detail and spend more time focusing on that next week. The vision is that we're a hub that puts those people who have more knowledge and those people who have less knowledge together, almost in either networks or communities of practice. I don't envision the center as being an entity that has a large staff, but essentially what we're doing is connecting people and providing a space or a platform in which they can engage. Would that be more aligned with what you're suggesting?
I think that certainly is one aspect of how you can approach that.
The challenge is going to be for us to figure out what kind of a platform that is. I think we're going to have some physical outreach and encouragement that builds those trusted relationships over time. And I'm seeing a couple of comments in the chat that I think are really important. You know, we need to focus on knowledge transfer. Where we talked about technology transfer in the agricultural extension model, we're really talking about knowledge transfer here. We're getting some great conversations going on in chat. Please feel free to just speak up and dialogue directly, unless
Hello, Denise. This is Mike Stelzer. Can you hear me?
We can hear you fine. Welcome, Mike.
Welcome. Thank you. I appreciate that. I just wanted to give just a quick background and some thoughts on this. I had been at Ernst & Young as a knowledge management director for their Center for Business Knowledge since '91 when we created it. And at Ernst & Young, I'd created 3 different knowledge centers comparable to what your ideas are. And end result was we supported 160,000 people around the world globally in 15 different industry areas, from senior level management down to the field practitioners, with all types of information. So it was relative to whatever the people needed in the field and whatever senior management needed to make decisions to deal with their clients. One of the things that we learned over those 10 or 15 years 20 plus, I guess, was that you really have to understand your audience and who you're dealing with out there. You had a lot of different pillars, a lot of different people involved. And so understanding what the needs of each of those audience participants are, or the audience that you're trying to serve here, is certainly a key consideration. Second, you would want to think about the priorities for knowledge management, because it's so diverse and there's so much out there that you're not a library just walking in and saying, where do I find X or Y or Z that you could go to in a library, but you're going into an electronic database or to a facility with a few people to help direct you to say, show me where I get to all the information that I need. So the key is the priority for the type of knowledge information that those different entities or those different pillars are using. And then have the key support systems in place, whether it's people or knowledgeable people in the center, or knowledgeable people in your networks of people that you can link to, or relative databases where it can support the people that are contacting in on a one-on-one basis with the person actually accessing and interacting with the knowledge base of information. So, it's a big challenge, and I think what you really have to do is put a model together that says, this is what, I know you're working towards that in your next meeting or so, but the knowledge center concept model would have to say, this is what it looks like, this is how it's going to operate, this is the objectives we've got focused, as you identified, and here's how it's going to operate.
Mike, I think those are some really good ideas, and I hope you all will come back next week and let's talk about the knowledge management. You were talking about a knowledge base. We've just finished some literature, some research that suggests that, one, the knowledge management literature is very scattered and it's very inaccessible. So one of the questions that I would like to pose to everyone is, should this network of centers provide some sort of a support in making information more accessible to practitioners? Because we're finding it's, one, expensive for practitioners to get access to the cutting-edge research, and we're also seeing that the research that's being done isn't necessarily translatable to the field. But let me just go back to the second question, because one question I'd really like to hear from you all today, we really want to focus on the community, meaning the churches, the community, the community organizations, the mayor's offices, the city government administrations, places we haven't really touched in terms of KM. So from all of your perspective, have we identified the right set of stakeholders? Or how should we be adjusting that model? Are the 5 pillars, are the 5 stakeholders sufficient? Is there one that we should focus on first? How do we approach?
Well, Denise, this is Richard H. I had a comment on that, and this comes from reading a book on the Mickey Mouse Club. I don't know if you remember, but that was actually a very trend-setting idea to read. Use television to reach people that young.
I'm going to have to agree with you.
Do we have crosstalk or?
Hold on. Could I ask whoever is, somebody has a bit of background noise, if you could mute? Richard, let me see.
Muted them, so it should be good now.
Okay. Go ahead, Richard.
Well, anyway, one of the things that was in that book is he had a model of what a child is, about how they were inquisitive, about what their attention span was, and he used the characteristics of children to make decisions on how he was going to run that operation. And what we might do here is do a similar characterization of our stakeholders and list things like, what are they interested in, what are their drivers, what are their pain points. And I think if we sort of put some meat on that, we would see if we were missing any. Plus, we would have a framework to make decisions on in the future.
What a great idea. Can you post a reference to that book?
I can. It took me like a couple of years to get it. It's out of print and stuff, but I'll try to capture something and post something.
Okay, if you just give me the citation, I'll see if we can contact the publisher or whoever owns the copyright. Because, you know, there are so many really great examples of knowledge communities that existed before, or communities of practice that existed before we started coining these terms. And you're right, that was a really great community of practice across a whole generation. Of course, I'm not old enough to remember that.
But anyway, I'll be glad to give you what I can on that.
Great idea. Maybe that's one of the things that we should target doing at the 2 on-site events.
I have a quick question. This is Lori Bush from Cisco. Just understanding you had the previous chart where you showed a list of stakeholder groups. We're very interested in helping, you know, learn and advance knowledge management, obviously within the enterprise, because that's where we're focused. Does that mean we fit into one of those stakeholder groups, or do you see us fitting in a different location?
Gosh, I could see Cisco fitting in several of those stakeholder groups. Clearly, you fit into the technology R&D, but you also have a labor force that needs to be up to snuff in terms of knowledge sciences. And you're also in the business and industry stakeholder group. I think one of the challenges might be to decide which one you would want to represent at the summit or at the symposium, right? But we're not suggesting that you can only send one person. So you can send people that would represent each. Did I answer your question, or did I confuse you?
Well, you know, we're focused internally more on providing knowledge services internally, but I can also see that, you know, having the visibility for offering those services outwardly, you know, to maybe other stakeholders besides our customers would be of value. So, yeah, I was hoping you'd say, yeah, you fit here. But I can see how we could fit in one of a few of those groups.
I would hope that you would at least consider participating in the technology R&D and sharing, you know, but sharing your internal practices with the other areas.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Sandra. I'm also from Cisco. I think I see what you're saying. It's one of those things where we have to, and you've got it somewhere on one of your other sides, where we have to figure out that balance between, you know, what we can share for best practices and what gets into our internal intellectual property. So I think it'll be good exercise, I think, for all of us for what gets shared, what gets kept internal, and how that helps the center overall.
And Sandra, I would hope that when we talk about the intellectual property and the intellectual capital issues, you would be sharing a lot of ideas there. I don't think any of us have any answers to that yet, but I'm hoping if we talk through, if we brainstorm, we'll come up with some ideas.
Hey, Denise.
Yes?
Denise?
Yeah.
This is Julia. Since I'm with the federal government, it seems like this center is more focused on a statewide effort. So, I mean, I'm interested in this because we do have www.data.gov for the federal government, which operates in a similar sort of way, but I mean, I definitely think that we could get some ideas from whatever you all do. And, you know, I would like to learn something, but I would like to know how I would fit into, you know, how the federal government would fit into your stakeholder stakeholder schema?
That's a good question, Julia. I think if you look at the knowledge economy work, to date, it's largely at the country, the nation, the economic region level. And what we've discovered is that, what we think we've discovered is that if you really want to grow a knowledge economy, you have to start at the community or the city level. But the national level plays a really important role in terms of policy. And we may, as a country, lag a little bit behind other countries in their information and their knowledge policies. So it seems to me that the national level needs to hear from the state level on what the policy issues are. But I think in the case of in the field of knowledge management, it's very much at the federal government level and the private sector organization level where we've seen the advancement in the field of knowledge management, let's be clear, has come from the federal government, from agencies and departments in the federal government, and from private sector organizations. If we look at practice now, that's what we're going to find it. We find a lot of, as Mary was suggesting earlier, there's a lot of good practice going on within organizations at the state level, but they may not know it's knowledge management. So it seems to me the center could play sort of that outreach connection role in tying together the national and the large organizations to the small organizations. So the knowledge have, or the knowledge know-hows and the knowledge don't have yet. I'm not sure that was very stated, but we need to be a source of network. I'm not sure that we're actually going to provide any answers, but maybe if we're a hub, a networking hub. But the federal government definitely has a lot of knowledge to share. So in fact, one of the things I would like to discuss next week is there's a lot of knowledge that's been generated about knowledge management in the federal environment. How do we make sure that that isn't lost? The silver tsunami is hitting the federal government now in terms of the sequester and in terms of retirements. So, what role can the center play in making sure that that doesn't disappear?
So you're going to let me stay?
Oh.
I'm teasing.
Oh, as I said, this is open and free, and we're interested in supporting knowledge. No. I mean, the other thing is that we would hope that if we can come up with a practical, reasonable model, that at some point we could make a proposal to the federal government to support state-level knowledge sciences centers.
Right.
Just like they supported the agricultural extension program. I think, we've had many efforts to set up single institutes or centers, but it becomes a financial burden and they don't sustain, and so they don't achieve their goals. So how can we design this differently so that it's, community-based, community-run, and basically people and processes, I think as John was saying earlier in the chat. It really is about people and processes.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, you can stay, definitely. In fact, if you don't show up, I will come and find you. Just kidding. All right, so we need to talk a little bit more about the stakeholders, but perhaps that's something we'll only really learn as we go forward.
Hey, this is John Coles from Dell. So, something else to consider is not necessarily the level one solution or approach that we're looking to create, but really that next layer down. And I think that's what a lot of organizations forget about, is the supporting cast of really exchanging knowledge, exchanging information. What does that supporting cast do? So coaches, connectors, digital librarians, taxonomists, the reporting and the analysts that see the information flow underneath the whole front end. I think that is an area that probably needs to be thought out really well.
John, I really like that idea. So I should go back to that 5-pillar graphic and put sort of a horizontal element at the bottom, and I like your term, the supporting cast. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, almost like an underwater river kind of thing. You know, you got, if knowledge is a fountain, right? You kind of have that flow going back and forth, and there's got to be plumbers down there and people opening up valves and pushing information through and seeing where the bottlenecks are. Absolutely.
Yeah, and you're right. Those are probably the people we should engage early on, because if the infrastructure is there and it's working well, then it makes it easier for everybody else to engage. If we don't have a good technology infrastructure, people will get discouraged easily.
Well, it's not necessarily just the technology infrastructure, but the people that are enabled by that technology infrastructure, and then how that second level of people is enabling the first level of people.
So what you're saying is we need like the knowledge extension agent.
Yeah, right. You know.
Yep. Good. So let me ask you all a different question. If you had access to a census like this, how would you use it? What would you contribute? What would you expect to get out of it? Because we need all of you to come to the center to bring problems, you know. But what kind of problems would you be bringing to the center? Maybe I should say, let's think about this for next week.
Denise, this is Richard. I actually had an idea along this line. You know, I just created a startup company, and one of the ways we got some of our major intellectual capital was through our interaction with the Thayer School of Engineering. And they have a program. It's basically a requirement of either the grad students or end year and a 5-year degree students. And local businesses will have a problem, like an engineer problem that they have to solve, and they'll submit these on an annual cycle. And then the students get to review them, and they pick which ones they like, and then the companies get to interview the students, and the school plays like that interface to, you know, come up with teams. And in our case, you know, it's a small company, but we managed to get 3 students that worked for 2/3 of the academic year on our problem. And we got to interface directly with the students, and that was really fun. And we got a really useful product. But perhaps the most important thing is we got the evaluations of their professors. So their end product, which was a design that they had proposed for us, got reviewed by the Thayer School of Engineering board. And that review was of enormous value to us.
I really like that idea. That's something that the center could definitely coordinate and then work with, not only with Kent State, but with other knowledge management education programs. So why not? You know, we have about 120 students in our program, but I'm sure that there are students around the country who might sign up for this as well. Excellent idea.
This is Marianne Malloy again from MITRE. There's 2 ways that I could imagine right off the top of my head that MITRE would like to tap into a center such as this. And the first way is looking for like-kind organizations to share experiences with. we're an FFRDC, a not-for-profit, and sometimes you can feel a little bit like the odd duck because in a lot of the KM venues, it's very focused on businesses that make products, tangible physical goods. So that's one way we would use this group is to as a place to find affinities or like-minded or like-challenged colleagues that we can learn from and share with. And the second way, I've been talking about this kind of as a thread throughout many of the comments. That's as a venue to come to find those best practices instead of having to go out and do a broad sweeping discovery of that on our own. To have some of that information already scraped together in a one-stop venue, I think would be of great value and a place to discover recipes for success of practices that others have found have worked well for them.
Excellent. Excellent.
Now, Mary, this is Richard again. Just to follow up on that last suggestion, you know, as an organization, if there was such a repository that, say, Kent State or had, would you be willing to, like, say, pay students or engage with students to discover things that are in that knowledge base?
Well, we actually already have a fairly significant amount of engagement with universities as well as sometimes even down into high school students in terms of internships, co-op working arrangements, and so on. Because of our FFRDC role, we have a community service obligation, and that has been a big part of it. In addition, as I'm sure everyone is aware of the STEM crisis, the crisis of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, students being in short supply. So this has been a big motivation for us to engage along the entire arc of the educational spectrum to plant the seeds that will hopefully grow in the minds of our youth so that they become future scientists and engineers. So we would certainly, this could be another venue where we would make connections to students who might be interested in doing internships and co-ops or MITRE.
That would be great. We find that one of the things that really helps our students is to have some sort of a real-world engagement. In most of their courses, they're getting an opportunity to work on a project, but being able to go out and work with an organization on a KM project for, say, a semester or a year turns out to be just invaluable learning opportunity. So next week I'd like to ask you all to come, if you can come with some ideas, specific ideas for what we might want the center to support in terms of maybe outreach, thinking along those 5 pillars. I just put some ideas in there based on what we had discussed internally. And my graduate student, Nicole Impact, has suggested that if, I'm not sure how all of you received the invitation. If you didn't get a dedicated invitation, would you please let us know? And we will send you an invitation. If you have not yet responded to the survey on the website, would you all please take a moment to go there and register your interest? Even if you can't attend the symposium in person, if you are interested in virtual participation, we want to be able to get a good sense of how many people will be online so that we're sure that our licenses to support the webinars are where they should be. And Jake?
Yeah, the link to the website's in the chat window right now if anyone would like to see it.
Thank you, Jake. So I guess I'd like to hear, we have a KSS LinkedIn group set up. So if you have further thoughts, please do post them to that LinkedIn group. And what we're going to be doing, as I mentioned earlier, is we're going to summarize what we've heard in each webinar, and every idea that you share, everything that you share today or you share in the LinkedIn group, you will find is channeled into the final design. So no idea is too small. No lesson learned is should be withheld. We want this center to work. We want it to serve the community, and we'd like to have a model that we can give to other people to work with as well. So any other ideas or thoughts today?
This is Sandra. Will you pull out? Oh, never mind. It's there already. The LinkedIn group. Thanks.
I think we also, I'm not sure if we posted the LinkedIn group on our website. Oh, Nicole says we have. Yeah, our graduate students are intuitive as well. They've reached that higher level knowledge plane. And just a reminder that these events are open and free, so we don't want any economic constraints to prevent you from. Well, if there is no further discussion today, I would just like to thank you all very much for contributing. I wasn't sure how many ideas we'd get today, but we've already got a lot to work with. So thank you so much. Please join us next week and come with some even more specific ideas on what products and services we should be offering. Also, please feel free to share this with any of your colleagues who might be interested. Thank you very much, everybody. I think we will let you go today. We'll end a little bit early. I think we've received what we were expecting from today, and I hope it's all helped you a little bit too. So we hope to see you next week, and also in Washington or Ohio.
Thanks, Sydney.
Thanks.
Thanks.